Many who have played Yakuza 0 will tell you this. It's a gritty crime drama that shows the dark side of the underworld, while still maintaining an atmosphere of whimsy, and when all is said and done, hope. Yakuza Kiwami, on the surface, seems to tell the same type of story, but purely based on vibes alone, Kiwami feels different, and to me, tells a much more grim, stubborn sort of story. One that shows the unfortunate reality of idealizing lifestyles and the pain of broken relationships, while presenting this idea that Kiryu can grow past the very thing that had come to define him, being a Yakuza. I'll just come right out and say it. I liked Kiwami more than I liked Yakuza 0. Yeah, on paper, 0 is the better game. Way more content, 2 whole main characters, tons of fighting styles, better sub-stories, blah blah blah. But something about Kiwami just spoke to me. If I'm being honest, it was really just a lot of small things I preferred that added up over time, such as leveling being tied to XP instead of money. Which, while I thought it was a cute gimmick to level up in 0 with money as a representation of being in a booming economy, I just like using experience more. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know? So boom, right out of the gate, Kiwami throws you headfirst into a Kiryu Kazuma that's been doing typical Yakuza stuff for a while now, and lets you get a taste of a full-power dragon style to beat up an old man behind on payments. He really is a true Yakuza now. If you're like me and were confused at what dragon style was, I'm glad you thought the real estate minigame was boring too, because it's the reward for completing that. Yeah, Kiryu's iconic style of fighting that makes him a living legend was learned fighting evil real estate investors. I love this series. We also get a quick glimpse of Kiryu and Majima's dynamic, which is to say that Majima acts like a crazy ex-boyfriend that won't leave Kiryu alone. Remember at the end of 0 when Majima basically said he was gonna act crazy and he didn't care what people thought? Well, yeah, he's definitely crazy. And this certainly isn't the last we'll see of Majima, thank goodness. He's my favorite little crazy bastard. Ah man, remember Serena? Remember Reina? Nishiki? Oh yeah, all of Kiryu's best of friends that got him through Yakuza 0 with his head held high. Oh, and of course, Yumi. She was super important in 0 because she's like in love with Kiryu and stuff. You don't remember her? Yeah, me neither. But she's just sort of there now, and just as important as our main crew. A strange decision you might think, but this is where it might be important to mention that Yakuza Kiwami is a remake of the very first Yakuza game ever made. An old PS2 game with an absolutely hilarious English dub.
Shut the fuck up. From the fucking Yakuza.
I'm not Yakuza. You retarded or just deaf?
Fuck you!
That makes Yumi exist solely because she was a key plot point in the original Yakuza, and they didn't feel the need to implement her in the prequel for whatever reason. So she's here to stay. Okay, you might say, she must not be that important if they didn't include her in 0. Oh, she's one of the main factors for why Kiryu spends 10 years in the joint in the first place. I wonder if that made him some sort of puss. Fresh out of his 10 years behind bars, Kiryu is weak and not quite the Dragon of Dojima he used to be, and he actually loses to Majima in a fight, which is sort of crazy. I think this is like one of the few, if only, times he canonically loses. Unreal, trash game, I'm uninstalling, Kiryu Kazuma never loses. The 10 years are the canonical explanation as to why someone as strong as Kiryu is essentially reset back to level 1. It's a common trope, but I like when it's done well, particularly in Kingdom Hearts, where there is a constant reason for Sora to be set back to level 1, which I find funnier and funnier with every new entry. Yakuza always seems to tie core parts of its leveling, abilities, heat actions, all that jazz, to random-ass side content. It's not too different for Kiwami, but I hesitate to call the Majima Everywhere system random-ass side content. Is he just chilling in this alleyway? It's a key part in getting Kiryu's iconic style back into fighting form. It has an entire upgrade tree designed around different fights and interactions with Majima. What version of Majima you run into, hell, his ass will show up at the Pocket Circuit Arena, and you have to beat him in RC car racing, and your reward is one of the key parts of making Dragon style as strong as it used to be. I don't know about you, but that's peak game design to me. Since Dragon style won't really be worth using until at least A or S rank, the old styles come back swinging, returning from Yakuza 0, and I still have the same opinions as I did before. Rush just really kicks ass. You do not get hit if you're good, which I'm not. My sentiment on Yakuza combat in general is mostly unchanged, since Kiwami combat is basically identical to Zero's, running in the same engine and all. Heat actions still feel like you're actually killing people, and the absolute thrill of giving someone the old 1-2 never stops being fun. Although, one of my favorite things about Kiwami combat, one thing I think makes its combat feel so good, is the late game ability Tiger Drop. Tiger Drop on the surface is a simple counter move, like you'd see in many other similar games. Get the timing right, and you take no damage while putting the enemy flat on their ass. The neat thing about Tiger Drop is, being a late game ability tied to a fighting style that also doesn't become conceivably good until the late game, is they just made it so broken. It's a move that does more damage the lower your heat gauge is, on average dealing, oh dear god. On top of this, successfully executing a Tiger Drop will fill your heat bar dramatically, meaning you can then follow it up with a heat action to do a ton of damage. Then your heat bar is empty again, so your next Tiger Drop does a lot of damage. Starting to see why this is so busted? If you wanted to take it a step further, use this in-game ability in Beast style, which takes all your heat and makes your attacks stronger. Then Tiger Drop while that buff is active, and you basically one-shot anything that isn't a boss. Now you're really not sugarcoating it. Kiwami being a remake of the first game means it introduces a lot of characters that will be recurring, something that Zero being a prequel just simply couldn't do, or had to be very careful with doing. They had a lot more freedom with Majima's half of Zero, but it's why Kiryu's half primarily revolves around Tachibana and Oda, characters that die after their part of the story is resolved. Two of the best recurring characters Kiwami introduces are Haruka and Phoenix Wright, or Makoto Date as he's going by these days. That's not to discount Yuya and Kazuki, who are the absolute goats, but enough about them. Haruka is an innocent orphan that fully deserves Kiryu's protection, whose first scene actually makes it impossible not to feel bad for her. Kiryu walks in on a gruesome scene of all these dead characters in a bar and cautiously checks the corner to find a small girl holding a gun and just shaking in fear. It's such a pure display of the horrors of the Yakuza world, attributing to that darker, grim feeling I kept getting as I played more and more of Kiwami. Date is the cop that initially questions Kiryu when he's getting ready to spend his infamous 10 years, and is seemingly the one person who has doubts that Dojima was killed by Kiryu in the first place. The rest of the police department seeming pretty eager to just throw Kiryu in jail for it and call it a day. Date works hand in hand with Kiryu throughout the duration of Kiwami, proving time and time again to not only be a reliable asset to Kiryu, but a good friend as well. That's to say, unlike an old friend of Kiryu's that he is no longer on the greatest of terms with, to put it lightly. Brother, Kyodai if you will, Akira Nishikiyami. Nishiki in Yakuza 0 was one of Kiryu's greatest allies, his sworn brother from their time spent together in the Sunflower Orphanage. They were inseparable, but 10 years changes a man, and no one was affected more by Kiryu's absence than Nishiki himself. Over the course of the game, we're slowly drip-fed scenes of Nishiki going down the spiral that leads to him being able to do this. Damn! Nishiki, holy shit! And we learn very quickly it's because he's unable to grow out of Kiryu's shadow, a hard thing for any person to do. The Dragon of Dojima is a legend for a reason. It was also probably a bit much to just hand him an entire family of his own like Kazuma decided to do. Shintaro Kazuma, surrogate father of Kiryu and Nishiki, who inadvertently leads them down the path of the Yakuza, a man whom my contempt only grew stronger for the more I played Kiwami. You could argue that Kazuma is directly responsible for a lot of the series' early, foundational events. The empty lot is a bid for power to oust Kazuma while he's in prison. A certain event in Kiwami 2 has his name all over it, and his clear favoritism for Kiryu practically drives Nishiki insane. Not to mention glorifying the Yakuza lifestyle in front of two children he knows idolize him. I guess he's a decent person if you're comparing him to other Yakuza, and the game almost tries to make him out like an upstanding citizen with how they portray him sometimes, but I don't buy it, and I don't like the guy. His death made Kiryu sad, but it honestly shouldn't have after Kazuma admitted to Kiryu that he killed his fucking parents just so that he could die without guilt. You fucking suck, Kazuma. But back to the man he let go down a dangerous path. The perfect antagonist to show how even Kiryu himself can't save everyone around him. A story so sad, there's a whole karaoke song dedicated to Kiryu remembering his time with his former brother. Wait, that's the fucking Pocket Circuit guy. Oh yeah, Pocket Circuit is back and better than ever. Gosh, I love Pocket Circuit so much. I hope it comes back in every single game from now on. Oh, well, without Pocket Circuit coming back, why even live? I guess Yumi shows back up at the end of the game and then Nishiki blows up. Oh! The end. In all seriousness, talk about top 5 most avoidable deaths. Nishiki literally could have just not shot the bomb about to go off, or at the very least, let Kiryu get a little further away first. And even though I was extremely saddened to see Nishiki die here so early in the series, I have to imagine Nishiki was a lot less well received when the original Yakuza initially came out. There was no Yakuza 0 to give the context of his relationship with Kiryu, or to give players actual time spent with him being a homie. I imagine someone playing to have more connection to Shinji and his death, a character they actually spent time with, whose death is played as more impactful to Kiryu than Reina, a character who by all means Kiryu should have been far angrier about dying, but I guess that's just a virtue of being a prequels-sequels remake. Also, after a little digging, I found out the little in-between scenes that show Nishiki's slow descent into madness aren't even in the original. Kiryu just pops out of jail and Nishiki is just an asshole. Although, I gotta admit, I almost like that more than giving him the scenes. It's extremely realistic that someone steeped in the Yakuza underworld without the person who was literally their guiding light would slowly become corrupted by it. Overall, I was a huge fan of Kiwami. It honestly still sits as one of my favorite Yakuza games, if only because Yakuza 0 makes it a much more enriching experience. Next time you see me yapping about Yakuza, it's going to be over the apparently extremely divisive Kiwami 2, which I don't think deserves the hate it gets at all, so I'll see you then.